The action calendar.
Receive presentation on opportunities to protect minors from access to tobacco products, including a possible tobacco retail license ordinance and enforcement options relating to state and local law, and provide direction to staff.
Okay, and please start the time clock on that, Manny. We have a presentation. I will note that the council has read the PowerPoint, and it is rather lengthy. I hope you will not repeat it verbatim in your presentation. I would ask that you limit your presentation to 5 minutes if you could. So go ahead.
It's on? Okay. Good evening, Mayor, City Council, and everyone. My name is Joseph Hayden. I live here in Vallejo and recently became a volunteer co-chair of Tobacco Free Solano. I've been volunteering with nonprofits on tobacco issues since the early 1990s after losing my father to his smoking when he was only 50 years old. I subsequently found out that my grandmother, his mother, also died at 50 from her smoking. I was a baby, so I never got to know her, just as my father didn't get to know my daughter or his other grandchildren. Like almost every smoker, my dad began when he was a very young teen, given loose, unlabeled cigarettes without his parents' knowledge when he was growing up. When he died, I was about to enter law school. I attended hoping my law degree would bolster my advocacy for others who were being targeted by big tobacco, as my family had been. All these years later, big tobacco's insidious tactics have adapted. Because they still persevere, it is up for us to stay vigilant, knowing we are on the right side of history. Big tobacco is in opposition to progress and health equity. A tobacco retail license, known as a TRL, excuse me, is a highly effective tool that can protect Vallejo youth, helping them to live their best lives. TRLs have already been adopted by 209 other jurisdictions in California. I'm here tonight with a coalition of organizations. I've been grateful to volunteer with LGBTQ minus tobacco, Bay Area Community Resources, and Vibe Solano, the branding name for tobacco prevention and education program of Solano Public Health. Presenting with me tonight are Amaya Wooding of LGBTQ minus tobacco, Kaylin Kelly of Bay Area Community Resources, all right, and two Vallejo youth residents from YTAP, a program of Bay Area Community Resources. YTAP stands for Youth Tobacco Control Advocacy and Policy Project. Those two people are Michaela McElhaney, there you are, and of course Genesis Miguel, who will continue with our presentation now.
Is there a next slide, or?
Do we advance the slide, or does someone else? Okay, next slide.
So my name is Genesis Miguel. I'm a 19-year-old Vallejo resident and a member of the Youth Tobacco Control Advocacy and Policy Project since fall 2020. YTAP has been actively learning, growing, and doing. We worked very hard during the pandemic, and I am very proud to be here tonight to present this important work. In this slide, we can see that in the 2021 to 2022 California Healthy Kids Survey said 60% of juniors say it's either very easy or fairly easy to obtain vaping products. And 37 say it is very easy or fairly easy to obtain cigarettes. 27% of our VCUSD juniors have tried a vaping product. 9% reported using a vaping product in the last month. And lastly, 4% reported vaping at least 20 of the last 30 days.
Now, not all students in Vallejo are affected equally by this. Our project, LGBTQ minus tobacco, exists because the stresses of homophobia, transphobia, and biphobia result in disparate health impacts, both physically and mentally, for LGBTQ youth. You can see the charts on the right. Every group of 3 is a different grade, and the top bar is those students who are lesbian, gay, and bisexual, and they consistently have higher use rates for both e-cigarettes and for traditional cigarettes. And that's mirrored in a experience of chronic sadness or hopelessness in the last 12 months that's twice as high as their straight peers. Next slide.
From a Vallejo youth perspective, vaping has become very popular and has been increased by peer pressure, from being curious of other students in the back of the classrooms puffing a smoke cloud to have to use the restroom and taking a liking to the smell of the product that they're using. In addition to peer pressure, tobacco has been heavily relied on to alleviate mental health issues such as anxiety or depression, with claims of being a stress reliever. It has created a sense of dependency for the user of the product, thus creating a nicotine addiction. A huge misconception around vaping is that it's not harmful. However, these vaping products do not only contain water vapor. It is made of different kinds of metals and chemicals, affecting your cognitive performance and increasing the chances of high-risk health conditions such as severe respiratory issues. There is no harm, many have claimed, especially young people, but the truth lies in the fact: tobacco kills. I was a youth decoy. Fortunately, the numbers of youth sales have decreased, but there is much work to be done on our part to protect our youth. An example is when I went into a store once and I purchased a tobacco product. The store cashier asked me, "You're 21, right?" Answering with all the confidence in the world, I replied, "Yes." I was then sold the product. Over 200 youth besides me have helped the state catch tobacco retailers selling to minors. Our decoys have single-handedly helped reduce vaping among youth and young adults. However, we still have youth vaping as young as 5th graders. And we need to stop the illegal sales of tobacco products.
Okay, we're now at your 5 minutes, and you're about 4 pages into your PowerPoint. Could you wrap it up in the next 2 minutes, say?
We can attempt to. We were originally given 30 minutes when this item was agendized.
Well, I can assure you that everybody on this council has read that PowerPoint.
Perfect. Okay, in that case, let's see, we can attempt to sort of speed through it. I think it's important that the public see this information as well. So this shows that Vallejo has a very high sales rate, and that Genesis's experience as a decoy, unfortunately, was not unique. We want to point out that the enforcement that's performed by the state is variable. So some years many visits are performed and some years no visits are performed, like 2019. And this is not comprehensive. It does not cover all tobacco retailers in the city. Based on what we know, there are over 100 tobacco retailers in Vallejo. And so the best that the state does is 40. Next slide. So yes, we're here to talk about tobacco retail licensing, which is known to be effective, not only in stopping youth access at stores, but also just preventing tobacco products from getting out into the broader community. Next slide. Because it is a licensed structure, it provides local control. Also not on here is that because it's a local license, it can do things that the state license can't. It can be suspended in the event of a sales violation, either to youth or if illicit products are found. Currently, the penalty under the state license is simply a fine. And as seen previously, that is not effective at preventing youth sales. Next slide. So yes, we have compliance checks.
Mayor, if I may, I'd like to say something.
Yes, point of order, go ahead.
Point of order, yes. I don't feel comfortable in having them rush through this presentation. I feel anxiety myself, and I want to hear, I read the presentation, we all read the presentation, and maybe a half an hour is too much time, but 5 minutes is not enough time. This is a very important issue. These are our youth that are coming in, and I really feel anxious. I want to allow them more time.
I quite agree with you, but I think we're all ready to act on this, quite honestly, from what I've been able to ascertain.
But they worked so hard to put this
I
presentation
understand
together.
that, but we do have many items on this calendar, some of which will be rather hotly contested later on. So if I could ask you to be very succinct, we'd appreciate it, because believe me, we have read this, okay, carefully. We've even highlighted it.
All right. Sure. Well, we can share what is not in the slides. So what's not in the slides on this is that, so Proposition 31 took effect at the end of December, roughly, and so we know that when LGBTQ- Tobacco and Coalition visited 25 tobacco retailers in Vallejo, 17 of 25 sold clearly flavored tobacco products. And so that shows that state law compliance is poor, and regular checks to retailers could definitely help that. Next slide. We've already covered this. Next slide.
I know we're short for time, and you guys already saw that, so we can just go to the next one. Okay, so e-cigarettes still remain the most popular tobacco product among Vallejo youth. I myself, as you can see, is a Vallejo youth. I'm a junior at a high school here in Vallejo, California. They are easy to get, use, and hide. They look like a USB drive sometimes, so they're easy to hide from parents. They come with different flavors, which are, of course, going to attract youth. If they taste like mango or strawberry, we're going to want them. But it's very evident that an addiction and an epidemic is happening. So far, in the second semester of school, I've had to leave class and miss valuable class time 6 times. We've had to be escorted out of our classes, and the fire department has been called due to the fire alarm being set off. Make no mistake, my school is not filled with pyromaniacs. It is filled with students who are young victims of big tobacco, who use tactics that attract us to their products. And we are victims of the many, over 100 stores that sell tobacco to youth. And that's why we have decoys like Genesis that help us not be victims anymore, but we need your help. We need everybody's help to make sure that there's no longer students that are victims of this. Students feel the need to use this so that they can deal with the stress of high school. High school is very stressful, and sometimes they feel like this is the only thing that they can turn to, and there needs to be not only resources to show that it's not the only thing, but things to stop us from turning to that when we feel like there's no hope. And yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say.
Okay, next slide. Let's see, next slide. Perfect. So let's see, what's not on this slide is the amount. So $7 billion spent on discounts for cigarettes alone for the last year that we have data. In the same survey of Vallejo tobacco retailers that we did, we saw that cigarettes were being sold as cheap as $5.49 per pack. We saw cigarillos, which are commonly used with cannabis and are rolls of tobacco wrapped in tobacco leaf, if you don't know what they are, sold for as little as 50 cents for one, up to $1 for a pack of 5. And then we saw that 17 of 25 stores displayed discounts. Also want to point out that tobacco products are not economically neutral, although they may provide retailers with some gross revenue. If you look at, for example, cigarettes, the amount of costs that they incur downstream due to premature death, due to lost productivity. Every pack of cigarettes should be priced somewhere between $30 to $40 in order to recoup those costs. So the $10 minimum price recommended by the Surgeon General does not seem so bad. Next slide. And so no coupons and discounting kind of follows from minimum price. The industry tries to prevent price decreases, or rather increases, from impacting users and does not want that to happen. Next slide.
And I'll definitely be brief, but respectfully, what I would have the City Council take into consideration is that on the night that we came to have this heard before the City Council to get agendized, many of our youth waited on the phone 10:30 to 11 o'clock, well past their curfews, well past their study hours, because of the importance of the issue that we're discussing right now. Just in retrospect, that's extremely important when you compare it to the few minutes that we're taking now. What this slide represents, I'll be really brief, is that in Vallejo, there is a problem where these tobacco retailers are densely populating areas, not only schools, but also populations that are predominantly vulnerable populations of people of color, LGBTQ populations, and it's no coincidence that these retail points have clustered in these areas. Next slide. So the question becomes, since the tobacco retail license innately offers restrictions, who would not be eligible for one? Of course, we look at pharmacies and retailers that have pharmacies inside of them as just common sense places that would not offer tobacco products, based on the premise that these are places that are supposed to be encouraging healthy living and wellness. So it is a complete contradiction to be offering something that will kill you. I mean, just put it like this, you wouldn't put a gun shop in a pharmacy, would you? So the next slide is talking about using the most vulnerable as the victims, which the tobacco industry often does when it lobbies and it works to perpetuate laws that punish youth for purchasing and possessing tobacco products, when on the back end they're one of the biggest promoters of these tobacco products, as we all know from their packaging of flavor in their advertising campaigns. So the solution to all three of these problems: the first problem, the densely populated areas of tobacco retailers; the second problem being the pharmacies that would option to sell tobaccos; and the third problem being punishing the most vulnerable, which are the youth. The answer to all of those questions is a resounding tobacco retail license, which will regulate all of these things. Next slide.
We can skip this one, it's straightforward. Okay, so this one, as it says, there is lots of assistance available in terms of funding. I also want to just note that what we've seen around the Bay Area is that when, say, an economic downturn happens, tobacco law enforcement is often some of the first to go, but with a tobacco retail license, you have a sustaining set of funds that can ensure that tobacco laws are enforced. Also want to underscore the third bullet point under solutions, that technical assistance, not only is it available, it is also free. Next slide.
All right, so this last slide consists of many of the components of a tobacco retail license that would make a Vallejo TRL as effective as possible. There are sample ordinances available from the Public Health Law Center. Thank you for letting us present tonight. That concludes our presentation. We're happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. There are a number of asks for in this 44-page document, and council has, I think, already considered them carefully. We do have some public speakers on this. So how many in-person speakers do we have?
I don't have anything unless it was Miss Monica Brown. Was this the topic you wanted to speak on? So Monica B is the person who, in person. And there was another person, Nefer, was that you?
Okay, so we will recognize Supervisor Monica Brown, and we have 10 online speakers.
Oh, two more in person. I don't have your names.
Okay, two more in person, but Monica, go ahead.
I was trying, oh good, it is on, okay, I was trying to figure, it's very convoluted to come here, guys. Last year, the council members, hold on, let me try. Okay, last year, council members, this body passed a smoke-free multi-unit housing ordinance, and it passed unanimously. Now let's work on passing an ordinance to protect our young people from buying the addictive nicotine products in the first place. You have the data. This is truly an evidence-based ordinance. It is our job as adults to safeguard our young people. We know the dangers of smoking. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Brown. We'll go to our next speaker in person, please. And in view of the numbers of speakers we have on this, we will curtail the speaking time to 2 minutes.
We have 7 speakers in person, and then we have
down to 7 now. Okay, well, 2 minutes each. Go ahead.
Okay. I live in a neighborhood with many vendors of tobacco products. We recognize their payments into the city. However, too many youth under 18 are getting access to tobacco products. We proposed a ban in compliance with the past Proposition 31 to ban flavored tobacco products, ban the use of coupons to purchase tobacco products, ban all edible tobacco products, including candies, meant to addict users to tobacco and deliver higher amounts of nicotine than regular cigarettes, ban all e-cigarettes, excluding vapes used for cannabis, propose a flat tax raising the cigarette prices to a minimum of $10 a pack, proposed a flat tax raising the minimum price of cigarillos and similar products to a minimum price of $5 per piece. These taxes should be earmarked for education for K-12 grades on inherent dangers of tobacco and additionally fund free smoking cessation programs for Vallejo residents. Partnerships could be through organizations like Kaiser and Sutter to include medications to quit smoking. A component of educational and cessation programs should include mental health and how tobacco is used to reduce anxiety, depression, etc., and alternate ways to manage mental health with outreach being made available. Finally, a local tobacco retailer license to pay for the code enforcement and undercover operations to ensure local and state laws are being enforced. By using earmarked taxes and licensing fees, these programs could be funded without having to use city funds. The benefit of doing this is healthier communities and keeping our youth from self-medicating with tobacco products.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Tracy N., followed by Antonio P.
Good evening, Mayor McConnell, Vice Mayor Verdelega, council members, city staff, and members of the community. Tracy Nishan, Solano County Public Health, Project Director of Tobacco Prevention and Education Program. Again, I commend the City Council and Councilmember Bergenser for wanting to discuss this topic further. If the Council decides to move forward with the TRL, our program can provide information and best practice models that would save staff time and money. TRLs help protect youth from access to tobacco, nicotine, and vaping products. I want to be clear that e-cigarettes and vape devices are not, again, I repeat, not an approved cessation device by the FDA. And studies have shown that for every one adult who may quit using an electronic smoking device, 80 young people become addicted to nicotine through the use of these devices. We know that nicotine is addictive, but vaping takes this to a whole new level. Researchers at Harvard Medical School surveyed more than 1,600 high school students and found that 58% of those who tried Juul and or similar devices continued to use them compared to only 17% of teens who had ever tried cigarettes, because these devices deliver more nicotine than cigarettes do. Just as smoking rates reached an all-time low, and we had the industry on the ropes, as one Solano County leader put it, the industry reinvented itself and introduced new products to hook the next generation on nicotine. This industry spends billions of dollars to advertise and promote its products, and especially targets youth, women, and people of color with their promotions. Local jurisdictions passing policies are our best hope for overcoming this industry's negative influences and its effects on the health of our nation. Vallejo can be ahead of the curve and will become part of the momentum that stops these products once and for all. And again, I stand here before you and commend put our team to your services if at the time needed, and looking for any further information and education. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker, please.
Antonio P., followed by TRL M., and then Nefer F. Antonio.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and members of Council. My name is Antonio, and I am 13 years old, a Vallejo resident and young advocate. I am here tonight to share with you my story. My parents taught me how to live a healthy lifestyle. They are able to spend good times with us, and they teach us many good things. For that, I feel lucky. I am sad for those kids that their parents don't have time to teach them good habits. Many parents do not have time to be with their kids, and I see how this can affect them because they can be easily influenced by other kids. For example, I go to a middle school here in Vallejo, and in my school, they have found students vaping. Kids vaped in the bathrooms, even in the classrooms, because it's easy. They say it's easy to buy them too. I have learned that vaping and smoking is really bad for my health, and it creates addiction. But many kids think it's cool because they see many cool ads in social media. Please help Vallejo kids be in a safer city. Having a tobacco retail license will help us because the people that sell tobacco to kids will lose their license. This just makes sense. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you for being here. Our next speaker, please.
Yeah, Tara Lee and Nefer. and then Joey and William Q.
Hello again, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and council members. My name is TRL Martin. I am a resident of Vallejo and also a volunteer with LGBT minus tobacco. I recently, in January, they had a volunteer run where we went and surveyed 10 different Vallejo stores looking at what they're selling. And the results that came back was astonishing. They're still selling flavored tobacco. And as an adult today, but as a underage youth that was addicted to tobacco, I'm a survivor of big tobacco. And I'm seeing today what happened to me as a child. Back then, it was on cartoons. It was Flintstones smoking. We were able to smoke in restaurants. It was smoking or non-smoking. And now here we are again in another generation, and they've just hooked another generation of kids. And it's just so inspiring today to see so many people stand up. I'm so passionate over this topic. So I'm coming up on 5 years without tobacco in my life, and I'm here dedicated to serve the next generation behind me so they don't have to serve 15 years of their life like I did with this monkey on their back. And so here these youth are standing up today fighting for freedom, for equality when it comes to this addiction that's ravaging the next generation of kids that are here today. And not only is vaping just ravaging families, people it doesn't smell like it did, so people are smoking in restaurants, people are smoking in bathrooms, people are smoking at the grocery store, blowing the smoke in their clothes. And if we think that we're ignorant to the fact that this is still happening and this is just another hook that big tobacco is doing, then that is unfortunate that we don't stand up for it and fight right now. Fight against big tobacco. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Nefer F, and then Joey B, and William Q.
Good evening, Mayor and Vice Mayor and all members of the council. I am here tonight as a concerned parent of teenagers. And we all know that our youth have not had it easy during the pandemic that lasted 3 years. And within the pandemic, now we have an epidemic, which is vaping. I just want to be brief and encourage you to please listen to the youth that have come to speak on behalf of many youth that probably this work will benefit them. The tobacco industry is very perverse. They are creating different tactics. We have heard how much money they inject into marketing, into social media, into creating devices that look really cool, that can bring flavors that are related to our culture, like dulce de leche, fresas con crema. So those are just tactics. And so they're doing it because they want customers for life. And we need to be able to see profit versus empathy of our kids. And so it's very simple. Having a TRL is a simple mechanism that would allow people to be responsible if they sell to kids, or to be able to have some sort of regulation. So you have in your packet everything that becomes in the TRL. It's a list of components, and we are here to support you in this process. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker.
Joey B. William Q. Okay.
Okay, so virtual speakers, Manny, go ahead and start calling them, 2 minutes each.
Hina B, go ahead.
Good evening, Mayor McConnell, Vice Mayor Videra Alega, and members of the council. My name is Hina, and I am a 15-year-old Vallejo resident and youth advocate. Since fall 2022, I've been a part of YTAP, a youth advocacy project for tobacco control. Tonight, I would like to thank you for the work you are doing for our city, and at the same time, I would like to share why it is important to adopt the TRL. As a youth advocate, I have done a lot of research and see the epidemic of tobacco products and its effects on youth. With my research, I have seen that there has been an increase in the amount of youth using tobacco products throughout the years. Adopting a TRL can help lower the amount of youth using and able to easily get tobacco products. Adopting a TRL will help keep the youth here in Vallejo, like me, safe and will protect our futures and health. I encourage you to help us keep the youth safe with the TRL. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Our next speaker.
Raymond C., go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really do appreciate each and one of you as elected policymakers. Again, I wanted to thank you for your leadership and your attention to our TRL presentation. My wife and I, we are the parents of the late Fairfield City Councilman Matt Garcia. We tragically lost him in 2008. We are so intimately aware that cigarettes are the gateway to a horrible lifestyle of jails and institutions and early death. And our son was elected on the campaign promises that we would support our youth, it would help stop crime and ultimately strengthen our communities. Again, thank you for taking the time out to consider the TRL presentation. It's an essential mechanism to guarantee the safe and well-being of our children. Again, we know many tobacco retailers in Vallejo are selling to underage youth and are in violation of California's recently adopted Proposition 31, requiring the end of sales to most flavored tobaccos. So again, I want to thank you in advance for your leadership and your attention to our presentation tonight. Thank you again.
Thank you for your comments and your contributions. Our next speaker, please.
Blythe Y., go ahead.
Thank you, Council. My name is Blythe Young. I'm the Community Advocacy Director for the American Heart Association here in the Bay Area. I'm urging you to adopt a comprehensive tobacco retail license that includes the sales restriction of all flavors going beyond the state and following the local Bay Area example. I also urge you to include a compliance check, at least one per year, for retailers to make sure that they are following the laws that you put in place, and to make sure that that is funded through a fee that retailers pay annually that covers the cost of enforcement. This is best practice. It's all covered in the Public Health Law Center model, which is the state's technical assistance provider for tobacco policy. They can help you draft your policy for free. The Heart Association is also available to provide technical assistance. I work in all 9 counties of the Bay and have learned a lot over the past 5 years in terms of tobacco policy, and would be happy to share best practices and lessons learned. But you've received a great presentation from LGBTQ minus tobacco. Thank you for letting them finish. I know they put a lot of work into it, and they are also experts on best practice policy for tobacco in the Bay Area. So respectfully ask for your full support of the recommendations you've received, and look forward to working with you on this policy. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker, please, Manny.
Mary K., go ahead.
Hi there. Sorry about that. I'm using my my colleague's Zoom. My name is Jenna Granlahano from the American Cancer Society Cancer Action Network. I'm the Government Relations Director for Northern California and also a member of Tobacco Free Solano Coalition. I specialize in local tobacco retail policy, so I want to thank you for considering the policy to reduce tobacco marketing and access to youth in Vallejo. I work closely with the Coalition and LGBTQ minus tobacco, BACR, and the Coalition Youth, who did an incredible job educating us tonight on the fly with limited time on the impact of tobacco in the community, especially the impact on our Vallejo youth. So I urge you to take this sobering information and turn it into positive action by directing staff to bring back a comprehensive tobacco retail license ordinance to end the sale of all flavored tobacco products, establish a minimum price with no discounting, and a minimum pack size for cigar products, make your pharmacies tobacco free, and reduce tobacco retailer density by prohibiting new retailers near youth areas or other tobacco retailers. The license fee should be sufficient enough to cover the cost of administration and enforcement of local tobacco laws, at least one annual compliance check per retailer, license suspension for violations, and eventual license revocation for repeat offenders. And like my colleague from the Heart Association said, this model policy is available from the Public Health Law Center, and I'm also available to provide TA to city staff in drafting this policy. The Bay Area and the state of California showed overwhelming support last November for this kind of policy to protect youth from big tobacco. So let's make sure that the city of Vallejo has resources to ensure effective enforcement to make our community a safe place for youth and families to thrive. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker, man.
Tino R., go ahead.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, City Council, and our Vallejo community. I want to thank you for having this on the agenda today. My name is JC Tino Ratliff, and my family and I are Vallejo residents. I'm also a member of the LGBTQ minus tobacco and Tobacco Free Solano Coalition. I am concerned with the health and well-being of our Vallejo community. And the reason I care about this topic so much is because it's affected my family, both young and old, throughout my life. In the late 80s, I lost my stepfather to lung cancer that was caused by his smoking. He was in his early 60s, and without going into graphic detail, the last few years of his life were not pretty for him or our family. Watching him waste away rapidly was traumatic for me and is the reason why I don't smoke. My brother, his biological son, never got to know his father. He was robbed of this time and experiences that he should have had to know this great man. My stepfather's smoking started, like many, before he was 18. Getting a tobacco retail license here in Vallejo will be a huge step in protecting our youth and our communities of color by helping our businesses that sell tobacco to be in compliance with laws that decrease harms of tobacco products on the community. I ask that you vote to protect the health and well-being of our most vulnerable populations. Please pass the TRL for the city of Vallejo. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you. Our next speaker, Manny.
Bob G., go ahead.
Good evening. My name is Bob Gordon. I'm a volunteer with American Cancer Society Cancer Action Network, ACS-CAN. Please listen to the young people who spoke tonight. Tobacco companies bring a terrible toll of addiction and death to Vallejo residents. And the tobacco companies have long done this by attracting young people with little cigars at rock bottom prices, menthol cigarettes, and other candy flavored tobacco products. And unfortunately, as we heard, many of these deadly products have found their way into the middle schools and high schools. Now, I'd like to bring your focus on a provision that amends a tobacco retailer license to end the sale of all tobacco products in all pharmacies. Pharmacies are a place of health, but national chains like Safeway, Rite Aid, Walmart, and Walgreens are licensed as pharmacies in California, and they're still selling deadly and addictive tobacco products. Vallejo could join 53 other jurisdictions in California, including Benicia, that have completely ended the sale of every tobacco product in every pharmacy. The provision works simply by amending the tobacco retailer license to exclude any store from receiving a license if the store is licensed by the California Board of Pharmacy, like the chains I mentioned. Community members and their elected officials do have the power to decide that local pharmacies will not sell tobacco. Therefore, you have the power to change what a pharmacy is for a whole new generation of young people. Thank you for considering my comments.
Thank you very much. Manny, our next speaker, please. And how many more do we have?
Our last virtual speaker is Carol M.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. This is actually Camille Cummings. I'm using a colleague Zoom as well. Thank you for having me tonight. Good evening. I'm a member of the African American Tobacco Control Leadership Council, and we advocate for the Black community and other communities of color who are often left out of life-saving public health legislation. I thank you for considering this item that for decades has negatively impacted African Americans and other vulnerable populations. 75,000 African Americans die each year from tobacco-related diseases, and that number is more than alcohol, AIDS, car accidents, illegal drugs, murders, and suicides combined. We strongly encourage the council to enforce SB 793 by adopting a comprehensive TRL that will end the sale of all flavored tobacco products, including hookah, ban tobacco coupons and discounts, reduce tobacco store density, and remove all criminal penalties associated with the purchase, use, and possession of tobacco products. Strong citywide tobacco policies protect African Americans, young people, and the greater community from big tobacco's predatory marketing tactics, which include making cheap tobacco products easily accessible to the price-sensitive populations. If the council truly wants a healthier Vallejo, and we believe that you do, then SB 793 must be enforced by adopting a strong tobacco retail license program. This will interrupt the predatory marketing tactics that commercial tobacco companies use that disproportionately impact poor communities, marginalized groups, youth, and communities of color. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Have any other speakers come forward? They're not. I will close the speakers portion of this. It's on before us tonight to receive presentation and to provide direction. As far as the chair is concerned, I would ban every tobacco product outright if I could. But I recognize I cannot. And I will seek the assistance of the city attorney as to our limitations. There are a number of requests that are set forth both by the speakers but also in the brochure. So I would ask council members to provide direction to staff if they desire, as I believe they do, to bring back an ordinance to implement some or all or even more of these provisions. So 3 of you have indicated a desire to speak. Councilmember Bergenzer, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, and thank you to the group for speaking. It's really important that we do this, and I apologize on behalf of the entire City Council that it was rushed. This is a very important topic. Today marks the 8th anniversary of my father's death related to tobacco, so it's very important to me. Sorry. So I strongly support this and strongly support a comprehensive TLR for ordinance for Vallejo, excuse me.
Councilmember Loredias.
Yes, I too would like to thank everyone, especially the youth that came here today. I'm glad you were able to do most of your presentation. We did all read it. You did an excellent job presenting. Thank you. You know, I was 18 years old when I had my first son, and the greatest gift that my father could give my son was to stop his 30-year habit of smoking. Because when I was growing up in a chimney, and he decided that when his grandson was born that he wanted to change that. And I think that the greatest gift that we can give our children, our Vallejo children and youth, is to put something in place that's going to ban them from falling into this very horrible habit. So a tobacco retail license ordinance is something that is definitely needed. I will say today that our youth over profit any and every day. So I too look forward to working with our city attorney and coming up with something that fits exactly what you guys envision. I support it wholeheartedly, and you know, seeing people like my colleague Bergenzer, Councilmember Bergenzer, and those of you that have mentioned, really hurts, you know, because these type of deaths could be prevented. I couldn't, with a clear conscience, not support something like this, and I don't think anybody up here would do that. So thank you, and for staying up late the other day too. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Matulik.
Thank you, Mayor. And I want to thank Mr. Hayden, because I've met with Mr. Hayden and their entire crew and kind of heard this whole presentation already. And the thing that struck to me was the youth that came to speak about this, because this is a youth issue in my mind. Working for the school district, we've come to realize that this is not an adult issue. This is down to our youth and how it's impacting. And if we can combat it at the youth level. And this is where I'm hoping with this, whatever we're going to put together, there is going to be an educational component all the way down to the elementary school level, because that is where it starts, where the misinformation, because we definitely need to combat the marketing. I mean, because obviously the marketing juggernaut that the tobacco industry has, we can only combat it through education, and we need to start it at our youngest folks. And I hope it takes it to the level of I know when I was playing sports through my high school days, that there was an agreement that we actually had to sign against tobacco, alcohol, and illegal drugs. And I'm hoping that still is the case for students to actually participate in sports, because that is just the leader to bad habits. That's proven here. So I want to make sure that, I guess I do have a question to make sure that, so once we do, it sounds like we may be implementing something like this. My question is, from a code enforcement standpoint, is that how much maybe will we be impacting our own level of staffing to be able to address this? Because I want to make sure we're sending a strong message to those retailers that are selling to the youth, that not only that this is a serious issue to us, but we want to make sure you are held accountable if you are selling this to the youth. So I just want to make sure that our code enforcement is up to the task to be able to address this issue.
Ms. Deb?
So I'll start and then turn it over to the city manager to speak to that issue. But so I have been involved in tobacco retail licensing over a decade ago in cities that I worked in before. So the concept, and one that some of the speakers spoke to, is that the fees that you collect for the licensing are used in order to step up the enforcement associated therewith. Now, there's a little bit of balance in looking at, how much are the fees, how much does it cost us to gain additional enforcement officers and or perform stings, et cetera. But the concept is to balance those interests so that the ordinance itself pays for the enforcement. The other issue really is that, the sale of tobacco products is lucrative for the seller. Ordinances that serve to either suspend for a period of time their ability to sell is a big disincentive. And ordinances that tag repeat offenders with the removal of their license, meaning they can't sell at all, is also a big disincentive, which reduces the amount of money you have to put behind enforcement, if you will, because repeat offenders are just at that point done to a certain extent. So that would be the concept. We would come back and revisit the council on the price of the license, if in fact it is not cost covering, in order to attempt to make it cost covering for the future.
Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification.
You're welcome.
Vice Mayor?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Joseph Hayden and the LGBTQ group, Tobacco Free, especially Genesis Miguel. Thank you. Glad to see you again. And I have to give special mention to her because she was part of the effort when we did the smoke-free multi-dwelling unit ordinance. And I'm really pleased that you have come forward to bring this to us, the council. This is actually the fourth ordinance if we are to pass this, and I'm confident we will pass this. First, we had the smoke-free parks many years ago, smoke-free bus stops ordinance, and then smoke-free multi-dwelling units, and then hopefully the fourth installment of a tobacco-free environment for all of Vallejo will also be adopted by this council. So my feeling is this council is going to go for it. In my direction, if you were to ask me, Mr. Mayor, is for the city staff, city attorney to look into other cities that have adopted a similar ordinance and just copy and paste. I'm saying copy and paste. The Public Health Solano County also will help us, the city, and assist us in drafting the ordinance. So let's use those resources in order to save staff time and bring the first reading for the ordinance sooner than later. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I think the direction of the council is clear that it desires to proceed on this. Some additional direction would be to review each of the asks that are in this handout and actually go beyond that. To the extent that we can create an ordinance that is even stronger, I would encourage you to review the limitations of the law in this area, because I recognize, as we must all do, that there are many, and also to try to make it at least cost neutral as much as possible. And part of that is deciding who is going to enforce it, whether it's code enforcement or whether we can give the right of private action to citizens who bring actions upon them and award them attorney's fees. But I see no reason why we shouldn't make it as absolutely as strong as the law permits us to do. And there have been a number of retail locations in the past that have obtained use permits. If they are no longer in compliance with those use permits, I think we need to identify those sites and make certain that nobody tries to resurrect that connection as well. So there has been models presented to you. I echo Vice Mayor about trying to keep the cost of staff time down as much as possible, because I recognize you're working on too many things already. But can you give us an estimate as to when you might be able to return a possible ordinance to us for action?
I'll do my best to give you an estimate. Certainly, as we approach some of the things that are on the table before us, this rises to the top. I would hope that sometime in the next couple of months, we could bring something forward for the council's consideration.
Okay, well, this would be consistent with the recently council-adopted goal of youth improvement, so I think we're all united on that, and let's just move ahead as rapidly as we possibly can. And if it will be more than maybe 3 or 4 months in the future, if you could touch bases with us as to the status of your progress, we would appreciate that as well.
Will do.
Anybody else have anything else to say? Okay, then we will conclude 9A and move on to 9B. Thank